right, what's going on, everybody? Let's get started. Welcome back to Jesus School. This is episode 4. We're covering the curse. And if you stick with us to the end, you don't want to miss out. Today, we're going to be talking about agriculture. We're going to be talking about birth control. We're going to be talking about the result of the curse and how it affects relationships and marriage and all of that. So stay tuned to the end. You don't want to miss it. And be sure to invite your friends right now. If you're on, you can quick share the link and that'll get more people online so that they can join us in this stream. It's going to be a really good stream. Looking forward to it. But first, let's start with one of our really bad dad jokes about the Bible. All right. And excuse my accents before we get started. So, 3 men are discussing Adam and Eve. So the Frenchman says, Adam and Eve, they must be French. They are beautiful and naked, and they have all the beauty in the world in front of them. So then the Englishman comes along and he says, no, not at all. They're residing in the most beautiful, perfect garden. They must be English. And then finally, the Russian comes along and he says, they're without clothes. They're forbidden from eating food. They're talked to by snakes. And they're being told this is heaven. Sounds like Soviet Russia to me. All right, let me know what you guys think about that in the comments. But let's get into it. Talking about the curse, let's open up with some prayer. Father, thank you so much for this morning. Thank you that we can be on here on this platform, Lord. We just pray that you would open our hearts to hear from your word, Lord, that all of our preconceived ideas would be brought into subjection to what your word says, Lord, the truth about your word. Lord, the plan that you have for our lives, we want to follow you. We want to trust you in that. And so, Lord, we just ask you to speak to us this morning, open our hearts to your word, and bless this study. Lead my words by your Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So, as we've been going along in this story, this Jesus School story, God has a plan throughout the whole Bible, starting from Genesis. It's the same story. We're not just New Testament Christians that just believe this little part of the Bible. The whole Bible speaks about the plan of God and the story of God. And if you try and take the gospel out of the context of the whole Bible, then you're going to misunderstand what God is talking about. You're going to be focusing on prosperity gospel. You're going to be focusing on how can God help me today? And you're not looking from the past all the way to the future. So it's super important to understand the whole Bible. That's why we're going through it. And as we opened up this story, right, God created the world. Then we get into the Garden of Eden, where God makes this beautiful place in the garden. He puts man in there. He doesn't want man to be alone. And so he makes the man and the woman. And last time we went through the temptation in the garden and the fall of man. So God put that decision in there that they could either eat from the tree of life or they could eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and then they would die. And so we saw last time in the deception, the snake told Eve that she would be like God. God was withholding, so she eats the fruit, and then it looks good. She takes the bite. She gives it to Adam. Adam also takes the fruit, and then instantly they realize we're naked, we're in the garden, and God's coming. We did something wrong, right? And God comes walking into the garden, so that's where we pick up the second half of chapter 3, Genesis chapter 3. That's where we are today. And I'm just going to go through the story. Read it for yourself. It's super important that you read it, but I'm just going to paraphrase the story. So God is walking in the garden, and he says, where are you guys at? And Adam says, we were hiding because we're naked, right? We're here. We hear you in the garden. This is embarrassing. We don't want to be seen by God naked. And so God says, well, who told you you were naked? You didn't know that before. Who told you you were naked? Did you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? So, of course, Adam says, actually, it was the woman that you gave me. She gave me the fruit and I ate it. And so Eve's looking over here and she's seeing this and she said, well, I was deceived, right? I'm innocent, Eve. I was deceived when the snake gave me the food to eat. And so they pass the blame down the line. It gets to the snake. And so then God puts these curses, these punishments on all the way down. And that's what we're going to get into today. There's a curse for the snake, there's a curse for the woman, and there's a curse for the man. And so that's what we're going to cover today. Should be good. And there's a lot we can learn from this. Okay. Find my place in the notes. Why does God place a curse on mankind? I think a lot of us maybe think about this. Why would God do this? It seems kind of harsh. Like this is the first immediate sin that they do. But it's a big sin. It's a big change that they made, going from a perfect good world to now sin entering that world. And so that comes with consequences. And if you're a parent, you know how consequences work. You know that you have to put in these consequences, but the purpose of the consequence is not to make somebody's life hard and miserable for no reason. Of course, it does do that. Your kid's going to be kicking and screaming when you put in these consequences. But the reason that you put in these consequences is because you want to bring them back to the right way, to restore them to the truth, to bring them on the right path again. That's why you put consequences in place. And there's going to be two kind of ways that as a kid, you're going to take these consequences. It goes all the way up into being an adult. And if you're a stubborn kid, when you get hit with these consequences, what you do is you get angry and you start fighting against these consequences, and you try and push back, get around it any way that you can to get away from these consequences or not to have them apply to you. But like my parents, the consequences increase the more that you push away from the intended result of the consequence. So maybe you're in trouble, and if you confess to what you did, then the consequence will be less than if you don't confess to what you did. Or maybe you're a kid screaming in the store and you're not listening to your parents, and your parents tell you, okay, you're in trouble now. If you don't start acting up, the consequences are going to get higher and higher and higher as you keep going. And so it's the same way with God. Sometimes we can be those kicking and screaming kids where we don't want this consequence to come. And so we push against it, but we know that the consequences are just surmounting. They're just building up. And so it's the same thing with these curses. Because God is placing these curses on the world. And God is doing this for a reason. God has a plan, and God wants to redeem the world. That's why he's doing this. That's why he's putting these consequences on. And so now that they've fallen, we're going to see today that he's already putting that plan back in place of how he's going to restore them. But these consequences, it doesn't help to go against them. For us as people, it doesn't help us if we try and say, God's evil, God's doing this, in the same way that if your parent was putting consequences on you, it doesn't help to go against them, because it actually just increases the consequence. Because there's a true, there's a good, there's a right way that we need to be going. And so it's important that as we go through these curses, let's be taught by them. They're going to tell us a lot about human nature. They're going to tell us a lot about how the world works. And so we need to listen to them instead of turning away from them. And I think that's important. That's an important lesson for us to learn when we go through this, because a lot of times humans just get angry. Humans say, I don't like it that God's doing this. And so we turn away and we think it's going to be okay. But in the same way that the sin actually led to death in the garden, when they got taken out, we're going to see that. in the same way, the consequences will just keep surmounting for us more and more and more the more we depart from God's actual path, the actual plan that He has for us. So let's be trained by them. That's the best thing that we can do. We need to submit to the consequence, the curse that's on the earth. Okay, so I'm going to order it backwards. So in the text, he goes from Satan to the woman to the man. But I'm going to talk about men first because I am a man. Maybe that'll give me a little bit more authority to talk about the other two areas. All right. So starting in Genesis 3:17, I'm going to read it real quick. And then to Adam, he said, because you have heeded the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree which I have commanded you, saying, you shall not eat. Cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the herbs of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. So initially, this first curse, he starts out with work. Work is from the beginning what God has ordained for men to do. If you go to Genesis 3:17, no, actually not that verse. If you go to Genesis 2:15, the chapter before, the Lord God, it says, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. So God had this plan initially that people would work for that. And then in 1 Timothy 5:8 in the New Testament, it says, but if anyone does not provide for his own, he and his own household, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than unbeliever. And so we get this role for men in the Bible that they should be providing, they should be working. It's an important thing. But going back to the top, God said, because you have heeded the voice of your wife and eaten of the tree which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat. This is why God is cursing him, because he placed the word of his wife and the desire of his wife over the word of God and the desire of God. And I think for all of us, this is so important. God goes before our earthly relationships. You have to put God above your earthly relationships. And that's not an excuse to negate your earthly relationships and your responsibility to people around you, but God has put that in order. And so if your wife or your husband is telling you to disobey God, then it's not good to obey them. God holds you accountable for obedience to himself. Women, you have a very strong ability to influence your husbands. Your husbands, guys in your life, they will look to you, the way you respond, the way you treat them, the way you push them. This is so important for guys. Guys actually are so swayed by this. And you can influence your husbands for good or for evil. You look at Jezebel. She was somebody who really influenced her husband, Ahab, to do so much evil. And it's so important that you realize that. That's an ability that God has given you as a woman. And men, you have no excuse to lead your family astray because of your wife, because we have a calling by God to lead our families. And so these two things come in tension with each other when there comes a point where you're challenged, or maybe you're in a place where your wife is thinking one way, but you feel as a man that this is going to compromise your faith. This is going to compromise the way of your family. And you actually have to obey God, not to disregard what your wife is saying, but to be accountable and to lead your family in the right way. So men's curse has to do with work. And that's because men's main job is to work. That's what we do. That's how God created us, like the passages that I read before. But the problem is now, unlike before in the garden, now you're going to work and it's going to be really hard. It's going to be painful to work. There's going to be it's not going to be the same as it was before. The ground's going to produce weeds. It's going to be by the sweat of your brow that you make your food, you make your living. And so this is kind of a difference. I mean, if you go out and you are working, especially here where I am in Paraguay, and you go out in the heat of the day and it's like 100 degrees out, the humidity is like 75%, instantly you're dripping sweat. And then you got these flies coming at you and they're biting you, you're getting sunburned. These aspects of work, it's challenging. It's hard to do. It's not easy. And God put that in place. Why did God put this curse in place? Why did he do that? Well, it's to realize that we're in a fallen place. It's to realize that now, like before, there's still work, it's still enjoyable, but now we're in a new place and it's going to be more challenging because this isn't the perfection that we were created for. And we need a reminder of that. That's why we have the consequences. So when guys depart from their duty to work, that will ultimately lead to consequences in their marriage, in their life. Why does the welfare system not work the way you want it to work? It produces so many homeless people because you're de-incentivizing guys to work. And guys need that. Though it's hard, though it's challenging to work now more than before the curse, it's so important that guys have that. And so when you take that away from them, they have depression, they lose purpose, they start doing drugs. This is why suicide, the number one group of people that are committing suicide in the US are middle-aged white males. That's crazy because these people, they're struggling with this. I was in Spokane before and I was doing some homeless outreach, and there was a big camp right by I-90 there, and a big homeless camp. And we went in and we started talking to people, and I met this guy, and he was maybe like 27, normal guy, just doing life. And he was in this camp, and we talked to him, and he was struggling with drugs. He was in there, not in the right place, but you could tell he had a really, really, like, his desire wasn't to be there. He didn't want to be there. And so I asked him a little bit about his story, and he had dabbled with drugs when he was younger. And then in the middle of COVID, he was living with his girlfriend, which probably not a good idea. And his girlfriend convinced him, hey, they're giving out stimulus checks. They're giving out so much government support for people who aren't working. Quit your job. Stop working. Quit your job and we'll make more money from the government. And it's true. They started getting paychecks month to month or week to week, these stimulus packages, all of this stuff that they were giving out for free. And he said it was the worst decision he ever made. He totally lost purpose. He lost vision for what he was doing with his life. He had no self-worth, self-value, and he was now in there on meth in this homeless camp, totally separated from his girlfriend. I think they had a kid that he's totally away from, and he's like, yeah, he traced it back. He quit working. That was his main problem. That was the thing. One of the biggest things that this curse allows now is it's way easier to be lazy because we don't want to work. We don't want to do these things. And especially now, if you don't have starvation motivating you to work, right? You can go to the store, somebody's going to give you food, you're going to have a welfare system, then you're way more likely to not work because it's hard to work. And so sometimes we need that kick in the butt. But one of the best things you can do as a man is get a job. Get a job. That will solve so much of your problems if you're not working. Get a job in a place that is meaningful. The work is meaningful. You're doing something that's helpful to the world, where you can actually grow. Somewhere where you can get better at what you're doing. You can see improvement. You're not going to get better at stuff if you keep changing what you're doing. So get in a place where you can see improvement. Work for an honest wage. Don't work for something that you think will make you a bunch of money. Don't go after that. He who hastens to get rich will fall into a snare. That's what Proverbs says. And use that money to provide for yourself and others. I think this will revolutionize because that's how God made us. That's how God made us. And it's going to be hard for guys. That's what the curse says. You're going to have to sweat. It's going to be painful. That's what this work is. But But us as guys, if we're not fulfilling our duty to work, it's going to tear us apart. So let's answer the question, why did God do this curse in the first place? Couldn't God have just kept it going the way it was going before? Why did God actually put this curse on the earth? And I think that's a good question. We think about that, what was he thinking in doing this? I think the main conclusion I came to is when things aren't right spiritually, that's important. We undervalue the spiritual nature of things, but when things aren't right spiritually, that's very important. And these consequences in the natural world that God put in the natural world, they are showing us the problems that are in the spiritual, the things that aren't right. And there's natural consequences to the things that they're doing. God didn't want us to be focusing on this earth, right? He says, store up your treasures in heaven where moth cannot destroy, where it won't go away, where thieves don't break in and steal. That is where we need to store up our treasures. And that is where our mindset should be as Christians. Romans 8:20, it says the creation was subject to futility in hope. God subjected the creation into this curse so that we can then hope. The bad things that happen in our life right now, the hard things that happen in our life right now, cause us to hope, right? In Hebrews 11:10, it says that Abraham was looking for a kingdom. He was walking around, sojourning around the world, looking for a kingdom whose builder and maker was God, that didn't have any end. And that is our desire as Christians. As we were taken out of the garden in the fall, as God subjected the world to this curse, the main reason is because this is not heaven. Yes, we can enjoy life right now. We're called to enjoy life right now, but this is not heaven. We're looking for heaven. That's where we're going. That's what we should be focused on. That's what we should be living for. And so this curse, this pain that you see when you're working, this is a reminder that we're not there yet. That God is taking us to a new place, a better place, like this place, but without sin, a new kingdom. And that's the kingdom that we should be living for. And so that's what God is subjecting the earth to this curse. And we live in this fallen world. And that's where we're at today. But we are looking and living for its redemption. And so that's why God put this curse on the earth. Okay, so that's the curse for men. It focuses on work. Now, what's the curse for women? Let's go and read Genesis 3:16. To the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Okay. Depending on how you understand this, the way it reads in the New King James is different than it reads in some other places. It's a little bit hard to understand. The initial thing is pain in childbearing. I don't know how God's original plan was to have children before the fall. I don't know what that would have looked like, but you can fact check me. But I was reading, and people say that it has been observed that humans, of course, human females, have one of the hardest labors out of all animals, right? It's one of the most painful birthing processes for humans other than other animals. Other animals don't have such a painful birthing process. So maybe in the fall, God changed something so you would have more pain in childbearing, more pain in that. And this is one of the main gifts, right, that God gives women, is that they can bear children, that you can raise children, that you can continue to nurture and to grow. And that's such a beautiful thing that God has created the ability for women to have. And so work, a beautiful thing for men, being able to procreate, being in the reproductive side of having carrying the baby, being able to nurse the baby, raising the baby. That is a gift that God has given to women. But now under the curse, it's more painful. That's what he says, and it's going to be multiplied. So maybe somewhere in that, God changed the way that the birthing, maybe you would have birthed the baby earlier, something like that. I don't know how it would have been easier, but it is more painful. And I don't know why it's more painful. Maybe God uses that throughout the scriptures as a picture of the way we are in the world, the birthing pains, how it hurts, the joy that comes after the birthing pain. So maybe it was a picture that God wanted to instill, and now in the fallen world, there was an application for that picture because God was going to redeem us through that same picture. So I'm not sure why God specifically chose that. But what I do know is it's not easy to be a woman. Pretty much every woman I know has some sort of chronic pain. I don't know if that's true for you. Maybe you don't. A lot of women push through it and are very tough, very able to push through that. But most women have migraines, some kind of stomach pain, a period, cramps. Most men don't struggle with that. Most men are pretty durable. We just go for it. We don't have so much of that kind of pain. When you start like to ask this question, here's a little joke for you guys. You ask this question, and you go to a guy and you say like, okay, maybe guy's having pain. So when did that pain start for you? Guys can always pinpoint the pain that's in their life. They always say, you know, like, oh, that one time I was lifting weights, you know, and I just squat too much. And yeah, ever since then, my back hurt. For women, it's totally different. You ask them this question, you know, when did the pain start? They're like, yeah, I think it's just been like that since as long as I can remember. But I think there's something to that. God says that there's going to be this pain. And I think it's the same reason that we just talked about with the curse. God subjected the creation to this curse in hope. Now you look at this, you look at the pain you're going through, and that allows you to see that we're not living in a perfect world. We're living in a fallen one. But there is the good in this world, and that causes us to hope for the new creation, the new heaven and the new earth. And so that pushes us to remember that. Okay, moving on. Your desire will be for your husband. What does it mean that your desire is for your husband, but he shall rule over you? In the next passage in Genesis 4:7, Cain is tempted to kill Abel. He's jealous about God's respect of Abel. And it says this in Genesis 4 verse 7. It says, if you do what is right, you will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. Its desire is to have you. But you should rule over it. So this is the same application of your desire will be for your husband. Some people translate it like sexual desire for your husband, but he's going to rule over you. You're going to be attracted to him. But I think this better translates, and it's more applicable to the world we see around us and to the end of the verse as meaning a desire to control your husband, a desire to be over him, a desire to have him. Many women in the world have little respect for men, and especially their husbands. Lots of women have a disrespect for their husband. I'm not saying that's general. There is many women that very much have respect for their husbands, but lots of women don't. Lots of women don't have respect for men in the culture. Maybe you think it's deserved. Maybe you don't think it's deserved, but I would just say that's not how you'll get the desired result. When you try and control, when you try and manipulate your husband, when you try and take over and rule him, it's going to have the opposite result of what you probably want, what you want to see. Most women want a confident, hardworking, productive, loving, leader type husband who's taking responsibility for their family, who's taking care of them. Most people want that. And the way that you accomplish that, of course, you find somebody who's not a horrible guy, but
the way you accomplish that is you take someone and you respect them. Guys work on the currency of respect so much more. They when you do things, like if two guys come into a room, like you know, maybe you make eye contact. If you make eye contact, you want a handshake. You want to bring yourself on the same level as that person in, and it's such like a respect currency that guys are working in. And that's the same way in their marriages. And guys are going to have misunderstandings with their wives because they feel disrespected, and it's going to cause the guy's self-esteem to drop. It's going to cause them to isolate, to pull away. And so if you're looking to have your husband be a leader, to encourage them in that, you want them to be confident, the best way that you can do that is respecting them, not trying to control them, not trying to rule over them. I can't pull up this statistic, but I have it. Look up online facts of the fatherless. Out of the 72.5 million children in the United States, 23.9 million of them are absent of their biological fathers. So that's about 1/3 of the whole children in the United States. 1 in every 3 children does not have their biological father. And so that's a massive sample. But what is the actual result of that? 63% of teens that commit suicide are fatherless. So that means that if you take the 30% equating for 60% of the deaths, and then the 70% equating 30% of the deaths, 70% of youths in juveniles and in state institutions are fatherless. 71% of high school dropouts fatherless. 75% of children in chemical abuse centers are fatherless. 80% of rapists in our culture were fatherless. 85% of the youths in prison are fatherless, and 90% of the homeless and runaway children are fatherless. If you don't think men are important in raising children, just look at this statistic. It does not lie. Look up facts of the fatherless. It's staggering how important it is for a father to be in the home for the development of the child. If you're a single mother, I mean, of course, you're doing everything you can. But if you're pushing away the father of the child, just know how important. If you think you can do it on your own, just know how important it is to have the biological father in the home. How important it is to have a good marriage where you can cultivate that and you can bring a guy in, and how important it is for those kids of the next generation, 30% of which are fatherless, will probably leave their own kids fatherless. So this is so important. It's such a big, you want to solve the drug problems, you want to solve the homelessness problems in the United States, teach people to keep their husbands, to don't get divorced, to get married. Those kind of things are the things that will bring real change. If you respect your husband, if you respect the men in your life, it will go so much further than you can even imagine. It will change so much. You'll see the transformation. This is no excuse for guys who aren't respected to live like a scoundrel, but you will see, if you, even as a guy, respect your father, respect the people in your life, how much that will change in the family dynamic, how much that will change in our society. Don't drive the men away in your life. Okay, so then how do you find a good husband? How do you find a good wife in uh the in light of this curse that's on the earth? So knowing that guys need to work and it will be hard, you don't want to find a lazy guy, right? Find somebody who's hardworking. That's an important trait that people have, and cultivate that in them by respecting them. If you're a man, work hard. Learn how to work hard. Start pushing yourself. When things get challenging, don't give up. And the best way to do that is do it with other people. Don't do it alone. Get a group of guys that you can push through the hard things and be there with each other and encourage each other. It makes it way better if you're not doing it alone. And for women, if you know that you have a proclivity to control your husband and this will do the exact opposite of what you want it to do, understand that about yourself. Understand that respecting your husband and putting him before you is actually very, very helpful, and it will come back to you and produce a lot of fruit in your own life. Understand that. And guys, you don't, Proverbs tells us it's better to live in a house, in the corner of your house, than in a house with a contentious woman. So keep that in mind. When you're looking for a partner, look for somebody who supports you, somebody who is submissive to their parents. That's a great way to start for guys and for girls. Look to somebody who respects their parents when you're looking for somebody to get married to. Don't find somebody who disrespects you. If they disrespect other people, they're going to disrespect you in the future. Okay, so then let's move on. The curse for the snake. What does this mean? Let's just read it real quick. So he tells the snake that he's going to go on the ground, he's going to live there and eat dust all his life, and that there's going to be enmity between the woman and with him. But her seed will crush his head and he will bruise his heel. What does that mean? In the initial context, I think for me, as I read this, it makes me think that he wasn't the snake that we think he was, just some little serpent. In Job 41, it talks about this dragon type figure. If you read through Job 41, Revelation talks about Satan as a dragon. That serpent, that dragon of old, is what it says in Revelation 12. Isaiah 27 talks about the Leviathan, and Ezekiel 28 talks about him. We think of Satan in this context usually as the little snake on the tree. I think he was something more majestic. I think maybe he was like a dragon, somebody who was flying, able, and this was a lot more of a humbling curse, that though he was exalted, though he was able to do all that stuff before, that the snake will be on the ground. And it's a picture for us. When we see the snake on the ground, we have this picture that the serpent has been put on the ground, that it lives and eats the dust all the days of its life. And the serpent is kind of this figure to us. We oftentimes look at it as an evil thing. They're dangerous. Most people don't like snakes. We just have this story. When I was younger, my grandparents lived in Arkansas, and they had snakes all around the property. You'd have a bunch of rattlesnakes in summer and different snakes all over, and lots of them were poisonous. And I just remember one day I was probably like 6 years old, and we were walking around the lake, and my sister, a little bit older than us, and we were walking with my grandpa. He's probably like almost 80 at the time. And out of nowhere, he just bam, bam. He has this huge walking stick, like, that big around, probably like 3 inches around, and he just smacks that thing. And I remember going out the next day and just seeing this snake, and it just had like these chalked out divots all around the back of the snake where he had just totally smashed this thing. But it's this dangerous thing, and it was coming around my sister. And so my grandpa took it. He didn't know if it was poisonous. It was getting dark, and so he just destroys that thing. But we hate snakes a lot of times, and so it's this picture, I think, more than anything, of who the snake is. It's a serpent. It's not a good thing. It's trying to, or can, bite you. It's not safe. And so I think that's that picture. And then this looks forward to Jesus. It's this prophecy right at the start. He will bruise your head and you shall bruise his heel. That in Eve is promised this seed that was gonna defeat the snake, that was gonna crush the head of the serpent. And so when Jesus came, right, Satan, so to speak, bit his heel. He was crucified. He was put on the cross. But ultimately, in that, Jesus crushed the head of the snake. And so we see this picture of the fall, this picture of the redemption that God has promised and will come in the future. So I just want to make a final point as we go through this passage. I think there will always be consequences when we try and go against this curse. I think there will always be consequences when we try and go against this curse. So we live in a fallen world, and there are absolute consequences to the fallenness that we just read over for men, for women, all of these things. But a lot of times now in our modern day, I mean, for all of history, we try and come up with things and inventions that reverse the curse, so to speak. And I'm not going to build a theology about this, but I just think it's an interesting thing that we should think about, we should look at whenever we come up with new inventions, new way of doing things. Okay, so hear me out. There's two examples that I wanted to talk about. So we have Monsanto. I don't know if you guys know Monsanto, but Monsanto is an American corporation that is the leading producer of chemicals, agriculture, and biochemical products. So they produce anything from Roundup, most of you guys know what Roundup is, to most of the seeds for any of our crops like corn, like soy, anything that we're growing in fields, wheat. Monsanto controls the patents for most of the seeds that we have in our fields. And Monsanto also made napalm in World War II. They've done a lot of different things. They've done chemicals, they've done agriculture stuff, they do medical stuff. A lot of these things, and there's a lot of money in what they're doing. But the thing with the seeds is now they have genetically modified seeds. So in these genetically modified seeds, they breed them to be resistant to a certain pesticide that they can then spray on to kill the weeds. And so they'll make this kind of super plant, and then they'll make this pesticide that comes along with it that can kill all the weeds, all the everything that's going to grow and hinder that plant from growing. And so then they spray the field with this whole pesticide. Now you have a super strong plant, and you have these weeds now that are dying because of that. But in result of that, then the soil dies. And the soil has lots of microorganisms in it. So you now need to put in a bunch of fertilizers that are synthetic to make these the plants grow and try and restore the field to the somewhat growable state. And you're also creating super weeds, because most of the weeds die, but only the ones that are hyper able to actually survive that will survive. And so then you keep making this hierarchy. You have to make this plant that's a super plant, and then the weeds will size up. And so then you end up getting at the end of the cycle with a field with a biosphere that's totally wrecked. You end up with plants that are very, very highly genetically modified, too far away from the original state. And then you have these mega weeds that are coming in, and they're able to now take over a whole field, and nothing works to kill these weeds, because they're so powerful that they've continued to move forward, and now they're really powerful. And so it messes up all these systems, and all in the name of what this curse was doing, that the fields would produce thorns and thistles. That's what it says in here. And those are a hard thing, and this makes the work easier, but now we're creating all of these other problems, and the food that we're producing is not healthy for you. If you eat the wheat that we're producing in the United States, you're probably going to have some stomach problems. That's why we have everybody who's gluten intolerant, so we're creating these problems. That's why people gain weight. All of these things, they aren't actually things that have no long-lasting effect. It makes one aspect of the curse easier, but the other aspect, it's going to have a long-lasting result. The second thing I want to talk about, birth control. Most women nowadays all around the world use synthetic birth control. It's so easy to get your hands on synthetic birth control. You just go to the pharmacy, they'll give you synthetic birth control. Basically, it's these little pills, and they change your cycle as a woman, so your body thinks you're pregnant, and then you stop having your period and your cycle, and you won't get pregnant. So this has revolutionized the ability to have women work in the working force, and have a woman do different things in society. When normally, if you get pregnant, then you would be stuck with that, and you have to be a mom. Now we have that, but it's not as simple as just take this pill and there will be no problems. So, one, the pill has a bunch of side effects. It has a bunch of side effects. So, why I'm saying this is the curse was pain in childbearing, and that's what he put in there. And so when you have this, now you create birth control, and it's only been around for the last 50 years, so we don't know all the repercussions of it. But the side effects: sterilizes people, it changes your libido, so your attraction to your husband, all of that's going to change. It's going to make a lot of different things. It changes, you can have internal bleeding, increased bleeding, discomfort, weight gain, all of these actual side effects that you can have if you're taking birth control. And you don't really think about these side effects. You just think you're not going to have a child. So gaining weight, all these things. But then it doesn't stop at that. Because if you take everyone in your locale and all the women are on birth control, where does the synthetic birth control go? You take one pill every day, and what happens to it? Well, of course, like everything we eat, it goes through your system, you pee it out, it goes into the water cycle. Where does the water cycle go? It leads down into the rivers and into the ocean. So now they're doing studies, and they're finding all of this synthetic estrogen in the water that's causing all sorts of weird phenomena in nature. And so, one, it's causing infertility in fish, which are one of a very big part of our ecosystem. It's having a lot of effects. And so this is just two examples of the reasons why, or things, inventions that we're doing that are trying to reverse the curse that have repercussions that we should actually think about. What is it doing? It's messing with something. It's not so easy. It's not as simple as just saying, oh, we came up with a solution to reverse the curse. So that's all I'm saying with that. Think about it. There's conversations about extending human life, about combining humans and robots. I mean, it's kind of sci-fi stuff, but it's actually things that people are talking about. And I would say it's a part of trying to reverse this curse. Is there a reason why we shouldn't live forever? I don't know. Maybe so. But let's just think about that. Think, why did God put this? And instead of trying to make this world heaven, let's live for this, building God's kingdom here, but also not losing sight that this is not heaven, that this will never be heaven. Okay. Amen. All right. Well, we're doing the news of the week, and then we'll do some questions after that. So stick with us for a little bit longer, and we'll get through it. So the news of the week is actually from my wife. So Germany has been taking a big step away from human rights as they're looking to legalize abortion up to the first 12 weeks of pregnancy and up to 20 weeks in certain circumstances where the rights of the unborn have to be compromised. Like if the pregnancy may cause mental issues for the mother, or the child is unwanted, but have no fear, they will have a 3-day counseling session before they can decide to terminate the life of the baby, to see if it's worth it or not. Okay, so Germany has had abortion illegal, but it hasn't been criminalized for the last while. So they're looking to move towards taking away the baby's right to life and make that something that's legal up to the 12th week, which Google 12-week-old fetus. It's there. It's got a heartbeat. If you want a really good documentary on abortion, if you're on the fence about abortion, the Daily Wire put out a great documentary called Choosing Death. It's actually really hard to watch. It's challenging, but it's called Choosing Death: The Legacy of Roe. I would recommend it to anyone who's on the fence.
Just so you guys know, the number of abortions in the US since 1973 is 63,500,000 almost. But we don't actually know the specific number because you're not required to report if you had an abortion, because that would be probably not so nice if you had to tell people that you had an abortion. So that's protected by our health and healthcare system in the United States. Okay. And one more thing, I thought it was really interesting. I was thinking this week, what are some of the biggest lies that Christians believe? And I was writing a paper for my ethics course, and I thought one of the biggest lies that Christians believe actually nowadays, especially in the United States, is actions speak louder than your words. Actions do not speak louder than words. Sorry, there's some weird comments going on. Actions do not speak louder than words. Words speak louder. Actions are so important to follow our words. They're super, super important to follow our words. But why, if you're in a government that's trying to control its people, why do they push so much propaganda? What is propaganda? It's just words. They're just telling lies, and lies actually have a lot of power. Words actually have a lot of power. James tells us that the whole ship is steered by just the tongue. The small rudder steers the whole ship, so the tongue steers the whole group of the people. Lies are so important. The biggest lie, I think, one of the biggest lies that we believed is that actually you should stop. You should earn the right to speak, that you shouldn't speak right away, when that's actually the way that God ordained the gospel to go forth, was by speaking. So that's super important. Just a thought. Let's get to some questions from the office. I'm going to just go through a few of them. These guys in the office here put together some really nice questions for me to go through. So, all right. From Toa, it's in Genesis 3:16. Says the woman should bear children under great pain, which means that she could. Does that mean that she could not bear children before? But why did they not have children before? Is there no desire for children, or the child was only a result of their sexual desires? So that's a good question. Why didn't they have children before the fall? I don't know why they didn't have children before the fall. I do know that God told them to be fruitful and multiply. Maybe they just didn't get that far. Maybe the fall happened really quick. It also says in the curse that they're going to greatly multiply your conception. So maybe the ability to get pregnant became more often. Like if before the fall you were going to live forever, maybe you would not have kids as often. And now women have a cycle every month. So maybe that changed. I don't think that the way the question's phrased maybe seems like sexual desire is bad. And I don't think it's bad. I think it's a good thing that God created. It can be used in a bad way, but it's not a bad thing. Okay. Why were Adam and Eve ashamed that they were naked, but not before? So I think I thought about, I thought about it a little bit. I think that before the fall, one, there was no perversion. And so it's okay if somebody's naked. It's not the end of the world. You go in the locker room all the time. But when you think you can pervert that, you can make it sexual, you can change it from something that's pure to not. And so then that causes the need for, when evil entered the world, for them to need to cover up. So I think maybe that's why. And just like a baby, you have a baby, it doesn't know it's naked. That's the same way. Maybe they just didn't know. It wasn't a thought that crossed their mind. They didn't know that they should be clothed. That wasn't processed through yet. Okay, here's a good one. If Jesus broke the curse on the cross, does that mean
that we don't have any pain, or that men don't have to work hard anymore, or there's no pain in work. So there's this theology that I heard a lot more about when my wife was pregnant, but painless birth kind of theology, this hypothetical Jesus has broken the curse, and so we just need to live into that. What does that actually mean, that Jesus broke the curse? Paul says that God will soon crush Satan underneath your feet as a forward-looking thing. We still live in a fallen world. We're still waiting our redemption. Now, we're in the middle of that because we have been redeemed. We have been changed. We have been set free. But we're still living in a fallen world where we still have the result of the curse, and we're still looking forward to a new creation. And so I think this theology is actually not a good theology. I think it's divisive, and it gets people to think that they're like, it holds people, it traps people in this, and then they think they're not good enough if they are having a child and they're having pain. And it's just kind of one of those weird theologies. I would say, yes, we're still very much still living in a world that's under the curse. You can see that all around you. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that. The world is still cursed. And of course, work is still hard. You're still going to sweat. You're not more spiritual. Like, you can't be more spiritual, and so you don't sweat anymore, and you don't get stung by bees. I just don't think that's true. Maybe God will give you some protection, but yeah. Oh, here's a good one. If working to get food and basically to survive is a curse, why do we have so much fun? Why do some people have so much fun doing our jobs? So I would say, one, working is not the curse. The curse is all the pain and other things that come with that working. For most of the world, not this 5% that gets to work on their laptops, probably less than 5%, but for most of the world, work for all of time has been very hard and labor intensive, and caused problems, caused aches, caused injuries. That's been for all of time. Now we live in a era where there's a lot of technology that's made that different. So we can sit in an AC'd office with lights, and that's what we call work. So I think that's a lot easier. Also, working is good. It's important. But the curse is that, yeah, the curse is that it would be painful. The curse that it would be harder than it was before. And I think we're still called to enjoy it. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining the live stream. I hope you guys enjoyed that. And next week, we're going to be covering the pre-flood world. So there's lots of cool stuff in there. Cain and Abel, giants, all that stuff. So be with us at 6 next Friday, 6 a.m. next Friday morning to cover the fall. And God bless you all. Have a great week. And thanks for joining the stream. Don't forget to subscribe, like. That helps it go out to other people. All right. God bless you all.